Here we are starting the build of the Bigwig. We're going straight into bag 8, and the first part is a gear with a 1150 and an 850 bearing and putting in the differential gears onto a spur gear, they call it. So it comes with ceramic grease, but I stick to my normal waterproof grease. I've always used it on all my cars for many years now. So just a smear in the bearing hole. Make sure the bearings stay in. And then 3 little bevel gears which go from this side. Put a little bit of grease where they push into. It says grease the gears, but I leave that until I start putting the gearbox together, because where you've got these laying around, there's less chance of picking up contamination of dirt with the grease and bits like that. So that completes part 1, as easy as that. Here we are with part 2, and it shows putting in the gear with the thrush washer or thrush bearing and another bearing and a shaft first, and then the gears with the cup and an E-clip and a bearing, and here as well. So what I recommend doing is do the bearings and the cup and the E-clip and get it out the way while you've got nothing else in there or even considering it, like even that bit, get them in. So we take 1150, push it in firmly, it's a good tight fit. We've got these drive cups, these are really quite hard. They don't seem like the normal metal softer ones, things like that. And then what I didn't do is just a little smear of grease. And drop the E-clip on. Make sure it goes on properly. Yeah, it seems to be. And like I said, getting this out of the way I think is the way to do it, because then you're not got parts in the way and you're fluffing around with it. I'm being truthful. It's funny, I've got the first one to go easy on with these, and this one is playing me up. There we go, we got it. Happy with that. Now it says take the bevel gear and you've got to have a bearing at the front which sits here, you know, so you've got to sort of do this in one hand. So what I recommend is I'm going to put just a smear of grease in, hopefully that'll stick the bearing a little bit, just in the case, and slide the 850 into place. Then we'll put the brush washer and we'll drop that, well, we'll grease the gear because this is a time to grease. There we go. And we'll drop that in like so. That's what it says to do. Then you take part A1 and you push it on and it should click, it says, and that clicks really nice. And then you put the bearing on the outer. That's quite a loose fit, I'll be truthful. And then put a smear of grease on that and gently work this in, because it should locate and slide into place. And that's the bevel gear done. The next part is to take, they call A1, which is this peg. Just going to put a smear on it anyway. Shouldn't need grease, but I'm going to. And that just places next to the bevel. It then says you've got to put a shaft on. There we go. And then onto the shaft you next fix the no, not that one, the other bevel gear. So we'll grease this up. And then grease the edge of this one. And drop that on gently. Give that a spin to settle the grease. If the bearing pops as you put it in, just do it. And then grease the centre again. There's lots of grease in. You can see why I put it in and grease. That's way more than it needs. Yep, that seems to be it. And then you grease this pin. Always surprises me, this floating pin. It's held in place really by the ball cups, so it can actually float inside. And then onto that, out the two bevel gears, it's the one where the piece goes downwards. And that's like just drops on like so. There we go. I must have knocked that off. And that does that side of the case. Now this side of the case is a bit simpler, because all you've got to do is a bit of grease. Fit the opposing bevel gear. You can see the post goes upwards. That just drops on. And then this is when I forgot to grease the other one of these. You want to grease these well, because they will. And this is when I'll put a little bit on here. And that just drops on. And like I said, I forgot this one. And that completes stage 2. Now section 3 is assembling the gearbox. There's a C6 and a B4 to go in, a roller thing and a bracket, and it's just held together with one nut and bolt, one screw, and that's just a screw pin. Quite an interesting part. I think that's to do with the body, I've got a feeling, where it hooks on. So first things first is gently put the two halves of the case together. I had a feeling this would be a chore to line up. It's gone together. Now we've got to try and work out how these pop in, and if we do it at this angle with the motor hole there, it seems to be, this bit seems to face downwards, so pop that in, and then the wheel bit just goes in the next section. That'll pop in easy. There we go. So pushing the two halves together to start with, I think, is the way to do it. And then I think the next thing is to get this screw in, which is just behind the blue bracket. At least this will hold the case together at last. There we go. And then we got the one bolt which is down the bottom front. I think I'll be just behind then. Yeah. And then we'll test how freely it runs. A little bit notchy. It's these bevel gears again, isn't it? I think once it's been had a run, it will clear up like the other one. And now the last thing to fit is this pin, and that goes in between the two bits there, so that is where the body hooks in, I am guessing. And that completes stage 3. Next is part 4, where we're fitting the pinion to the motor. There's a A13 gauge to gauge it, and you've got a choice of 13 or 15 toothed pinion, and we're going to go with the 15th. There is options to go up to a 17, I think it is. You can go even higher, but I won't want to go that much. Yeah, 16 and a 17. So what you do is, because I'm using the bigger gear, you have to drop that on first, and it will flop loose. And then we've got this little bracket. It literally sits on the shaft, and all we've got to do is drop it down, tighten it up, and that is literally part 4. Just doing that, nice and simple. We're adding the motor, and you've got these little shims. and it shows all 4 down for the smaller gear, which was the 13 tooth, but because we're using the larger gear, it has to have the 15th. It's 2 either side. Then you've got these a longer screw and a shorter screw. The longer screw goes through the washer, large washer, A6, and you've got to remove the shaft in the process to the bevel gear. So it's going to be fun because they're doing that one, they're all in the bottom, they're easy to fit, but this we've got to get 2 and 2 somehow. So I'm going to take the gearbox, and try and drop these in. It shows it from this side, so let's remove that first. So we've removed the shaft. These are fiddly. I'm going to be truthful. So we've got one. Well, I'll tell you what I recommend is taking the longer screw, putting on the large washer and the plastic washer, and ready. So I'm not scrambling around for it. Have the screwdriver beside. So we've got one in. We're going to drop the second one in. Then I'm going to lay the screw on and try and put them up from, I don't know where. Yeah, what I think is if I put the screw in, so it holds those 2 in place, it sounds silly this, but I'm going to spin it around the other direction and try and get the other 2 in. Yep, if you can see, I've preset them, so that worked quite well. So with it balanced, we'll grease up the cog. So we've got, this is well greased. Roughly work out what hole we want in on the motor to look nice. And try and get it to line up. Yeah, we got it in. So hopefully all those plates have stayed in place. Now we've got this tube, which is a BA21, and that just slides in and uses the shorter screw. That doesn't have a wash or anything, I don't think. No, that just screws on into the side. So you'll have to sort of wiggle it until it finds the plate, and you can get through that plate and into the hole. Tighten that one up and then tighten the lower one. So that should be all fine, and then put this shaft back in and it should be good to go. I'm going to try and spin it over to make sure we're not too tight or anything. because I don't want to get this wrong at this stage. It could be just the resistance of the motor, it's hard to turn. That feels a bit thingy. I'm going to take a chance and put a bit of power through it and see what happens. We'll soon know if this is right or not. Well, it turns, but it does seem a bit... I think it's because it's a powerful motor, the magnets, but it does turn. So that completes stage 5. Now on to part 6. It's just adding a couple of bearings to gears and putting in the diff gears again. So we'll do the same as last time, just a little smear of grease in those pinholes. And then there's a large outer bearing, small inner, and that completes stage 6. Now we're going to get all the gears into the front case. So what we're going to do is, again, fit the E-clips on the shafts and then go from there. Yeah, be careful with these E-clips. You don't get a spare. So if you break one or lose one, if you haven't got one from a previous kit like I have, you would be in trouble if you lost it as well or anything. So don't be rough with these E-clips. That's the 2 E-clips fitted. So starting with this side, we go through the thrust assembly again. I missed a couple of parts. Again, pushing on the cap till it pops, and then what we're going to do is assemble the thrust gear. Again, we got the little 850, bit of grease to hold that in, hopefully, like so. I think we might grease this up first. And then the shaft goes in. that wasn't so easy, I'm going to be truthful, as the other one. Then the next stage is on this bit is just add in a bit of grease. The gear with the piece pointing downwards, or the diff gear, and we'll grease that. That's that side done. This side is a bit more complex because we've got a couple of shafts to go in. So with those two shafts in, we've got two gears. There's one to go on first, which is this one. And make sure there's a flat edge, it goes downwards, there's a ring on it, and it has to go round so you see the teeth showing upwards. Then we're putting this one. Yeah, it's nicely greased. It's all even on on this gear. So if it's even on there, you know it's even on that one. Then it says the other gear. That's what I'm looking for. That goes on. Then we've got the shaft, the floating shaft. And with the floating shaft in place, we've got to grease the gear. And then drop this on. And then I'm going to push some grease in here and turn it a bit, just to grease this gear up. There we go, it's starting to self-grease a bit. That should be all the way around, the grease. And then the last part goes into that shaft there, which is the A1. And that's what we should end up with, completing stage 7. Now part 8 is securing the two parts of the gearbox together. There's this metal part, a hex, which bolts through, but it goes in a certain way that to that top flat there is where the hole goes. So what we're going to do is we'll put that in once we've got the gearbox together. One thing I haven't done is the bevel gear greasing. And now we've got to gently tease these together. I think this will be a bit easier than the front one. I've made a mistake. There is 2 different length tubes. We're going to have a quick swap round. There's a long one and there's a short one. And I put the long one in the short and the short in the long. that's better. It should go together now. That floating diff pin is a pain, but it's back in place. There we go, we've got the case together. Now this clips in the top. Doesn't matter which way it goes round. And that's in. And then again, this piece, it's to the up of. So it'd be like that from underneath. So we'll put the bolt into that and put the nut on, so at least we know that's in place. There we go. Then we got 4 screws and one sort of threaded screw, and these are all go into plastic, which is, there's no nut for that. It is definitely into, goes into the casing. So a little bit of wax on, and we've got it the right way round. So we'll do, there's a screw there. There's one here. Tighten off the nut and done with it. Then the threaded screw goes through that portion here. Right, we've got that one, and then there should be one at the back here. And there's one down below. And that's the case complete. And make sure it turns. Yeah, that's fine. Being new gears, they're going to sound a little bit gruff until they've had a run. But that concludes part 8, and we have completed bag A.